Welcome to the Pure Garbage Podcast. Lex's guest today is George Tsilfidis, producer at CFRB 1010.
Hello, folks. Lex Cunningham here at the Pure Garbage Podcast. I have with me a great guy, an up-and-comer, and yes, highly motivated, George Tsilfidis. He's from 1010 CFRB, which is a radio station here in Canada, and George is a producer of that. Anyway, let's welcome George to the podcast. Thank you, George.
Hey, thanks to be with you here.
So I see you sold cars, you went to Humber, you've done a lot of things. What was the make and model of the cars you sold?
I started off with Chrysler, and man, if you want to pick up some skills in the business, you hire anybody that ever worked at Chrysler, because selling Chryslers was very hard, just because General Motors always had the reputation, and Ford's, the number one dealer in Canada. Chrysler was always looked at as the number 3 of the big 3 North American brands, and man, you chip your teeth, you pick up your skills. After that, I ended up going to General Motors, where I sold Chevys, Cadillacs, Buicks, you name it.
Yeah, you got your feet wet in that business real fast, having to work with people that are under duress in some cases, wanting a car and wanting it for free. So. Oh
yeah, the fighting, and like what you're asking people to do is not only trust you, but also part with their money. It's like the second biggest expense they'll ever have outside of buying a house, and they gotta like you, and you gotta convince them to spend money with you. Sometimes it was a battle.
No doubt, Georgie T, and that's what I'm calling you now, Georgie T. Now, from what I've known of you, you're highly intelligent, you're highly motivated. What made you get into the entertainment business? Because you could have went a lot of other places, George, no?
Yeah, you know what happened was I had been at the car dealership, and I was doing well. It just, for the last 2 months that I was there, I stopped liking going to work. It started to become a chore.
Yeah.
And I sat there and I said, do I really want to work every Saturday for the rest of my life? And this is the truth, because in the car business, Saturday will make or break your entire month. So there's no such thing as a day off on Saturdays. Yeah. And I started to contemplate, what do I want to do? What I want to do for a living. And I read a book that changed my perspective. It was called The 5 Biggest Regrets of the Dying. It's where this palliative nurse used to work with patients who were, in their final stages of their life. And she kind of learned what some of their biggest regrets were. And the number one regret, it wasn't about, I wish I was richer, I wish I had a supermodel spouse, or I wish I drove a supercar. It was, I wish I did something I loved for a living. Because you're going to spend, 25% of your life working.
Yep.
If it feels like work, then it's not the job for you.
Yes, I agree. If it can't roll off your back, it's best to move on, Jack.
Yep.
That's big time 1010 here in the GTA. That's not like local radio or even college radio. We're all told at some point we can't do something, whether it's skating, throwing a football, ballet dancing, or singing. So getting into radio, I'm pretty sure you had your challenges prior to it to even believing in yourself, or you already saw it and you were just going for it.
So people had always detracted me. I wanted to do this since I was in high school. I wanted to get into broadcasting. And all you heard was, it's too tough a business. You've got to know somebody. There's no way you're going to make it. And I let them talk me into not pursuing it and end up going to the car business. So when I was 25, I decided to go back to school. I went to Humber College, and I said, no, I'm gonna try my best at getting into broadcasting. And the very first thing they told us in the first class was, you're probably not getting a job in broadcasting. It's the harsh truth. They said, less than 10% of the people who graduate end up having a job in this industry within 5 years. And then they furthermore told me, you're a Toronto boy, born and raised. Well, you're not going to get a job in Toronto. You're going to have to go somewhere in a small town, somewhere out in Western Canada, Eastern Canada. It won't be home. You're not going to make much money. And all of these things, I saw a lot of classmates that day, like their hearts, they kind of sank in their chair, and they're like, oh my God, I'm not going to be able to get into it. And the thing that motivated me was, I go, no, I'm going to be the exception to the rule. I'm going to be the one guy that actually does it, that gets in this business, that gets in Toronto, and I didn't want to listen to this idea that it wasn't going to happen.
3, 2, 1.
Well, indeed it worked, and perseverance pays off. And yeah, I've heard stories, the same type of stories for various industries, not just that, but particularly in the entertainment industry in Toronto. Yeah, there's a lot of naysayers, and I guess it depends where you go. If people have even tried it or thought about it themselves, and they don't want to see you do it because they never tried. And
that's 100%. I had a conversation with somebody who was close to me in my life, and they told me when I told them I was going to school, they actually told me that their daughter went to the same school and didn't get in, so I shouldn't pursue that career because I wouldn't get in. This is someone that was near and dear to my heart, and I couldn't believe it. I was very glad to prove them wrong.
Good. So what teams do you like? You're a Toronto boy. Are you a Leaf fan or are you a Canadiens fan?
I'm totally a Leafs fan. I'm a Blue Jays fan. I'm not a Raptors fan.
Why not?
Because when I started liking basketball was previous to 1995, so there was no Toronto Raptors. And I am a firm believer in once you find a team you love, you stick with them through the tough times.
Don't tell me you're a Celtics fan.
No. So I'm an Orlando Magic fan.
Oh.
I grew up on Shaquille O'Neal, Penny Hardaway, and the thing is, I also like the Miami Dolphins in football, so I am really a firm believer in sticking behind your bad teams, no matter what.
Oh, man, Georgie T, I was about to love you, man. I seriously, I was going to put my arms around you.
What's your team, sir?
I'm the Bills, buddy. I like my Bills.
Oh, so you weren't happy about this weekend's results then?
No, George, I wasn't.
We don't have to mention that.
No, we don't. But if my daughter was here, she'd probably press the hang up button, just based on how I indoctrinated her into loving the Bills.
I think one thing we can mutually agree on is we all hate the Patriots.
Yes, sir. You're back on my good side, and my buddy Boston Chowder that's on this podcast will find you and give you a hard time. Okay. Awesome. You're a producer of this show, so your daily grind, because there is a grind to everything, you know, right? But a part of your grind, a part of your hustle is acquiring and creating. Are you ever stuck, or is there just an abundance of stuff to the point where you have to break everything down and kind of micromanage ideas?
So there's some days that you just, I wake up and I check the news right away. And there's some days where you just know your job is done for you. It's just a big enough story that all you have to do is turn on the phone lines, say, hey, what do you think? And the phone lines blow up. And those are the days that we love. But the days that you really prove yourself as a producer, as a host, is the days when there's not much going on. And you got to make it sound important. So in a typical show, we use about 20 to 25 stories, unique stories, which means I read about 80 to 100 stories a day to try to find that best 25 that we can use for our show.
And you're sourcing everywhere, I'm assuming. Every media outlet, every news wire.
I have 35 different links that I load, and I check their stories. And people think I'm crazy, but that's what's necessary, because there might be a website that I could go there 15 days in a row and they won't give me a single story. But on day 16, they gave me a nugget that nobody else found at the station. Yeah. And you take a little pride in finding that hidden gem of a story that works so well for you. And you basically, you got to overturn every stone and look in every corner to find that story.
So here you are, you're digging up stories, and you've been doing it for a short time, right?
No, February will be my 4th year.
So you're in the 4 years into this, and you're still succeeding. In those 4 years, can you name one or two stories that have absolutely shook you?
Yeah, I'll tell you, if you remember the Toronto van attack earlier this year.
Yes.
And I remember I was just getting into the office because my show is on 4 to 7 o'clock in the evening. So I'm getting into the office around 11:30, 12, and I see the story on the TV downstairs where security is, and it says, vehicle on the sidewalk hit pedestrians. I didn't know what the story was yet at that moment, but I had a sinking feeling in my stomach, and I said, multiple pedestrians hit, vehicle on the sidewalk. My head started to go in the worst place possible.
Ugh.
By the time I got upstairs, within 30 minutes, it was starting to come out, and yep, my fears were confirmed. It was as bad as you can think. And I just remember, so whenever we have a big breaking news situation, you're so focused on your goal of getting out the information to the listeners. I'm also focused on lining up experts, who can speak to this and give some context so our listeners can make sense of this.
Yeah.
By the time this show is done, it's kind of all in a blur. You've accomplished your goals, and you don't let the story impact you. It doesn't hit you. I just remember, though, driving home that evening, it was about 7:30, and I remember having to pull over to the side of the road because it all hit me at that moment. I said, our city was terrorized today. Multiple people lost, loved ones.
Mm-hmm.
And it didn't hit me until the drive home. And that's one story that I won't forget for as long as I've been in the business. That one probably hit me the hardest.
It struck home, and the folks in the hockey tragedy out west.
The Humboldt Broncos. I remember that story too because it was Friday evening and my shift was over. And I just remember catching wind of it, around 9:30, 10 o'clock, and then that's another story that, that was a great example of when the country gathers around a small community, raises money, and it hits everybody.
You work with a good bunch of people, obviously, because you've been there 4 years. You can hear it in your voice that you enjoy everything that you're doing. 15 years from now, where do you see yourself?
The thing that I'm struggling with is which of two routes do I go? Do I pursue the on-air host type of career field, or do I want to stay behind the scenes and management and to the point where I'm running my own radio station? And I'm leaning more towards that. When I first went into the Humber program, I was like, I want to be on air. That's what I went for. I think that's what everybody goes for. And then I started to see the value in being the producer. And the way I to bring it back to sports, since we're both sports guys, listen, the guy on air is the star quarterback. And all the players involved. He's the guy who has to execute on the field. He's the most high-profile person who will get all the credit. But I feel like I'm the head coach. I have to put him in positions to succeed, and I kind of like the idea of being the head coach, not having to be in the game, per se.
So you like systems.
Yeah, I like the idea of you work with a bunch of different people, and it's your job to get the best out of them. Because that's truly what it is. I have two hosts that they have different personalities. They both have strengths and weaknesses. I have a technical producer that also, he's in charge of the audio. So there's 4 people on our show, and I've got to put everybody in a position that they succeed.
That's awesome, George. That's awesome.
It's the perfect blend of, honestly, it's the perfect blend of hard work and pressure, but also fun. But don't mistake it, we have a lot of fun.
Oh, no doubt. Are you reaching out to new technologies constantly to try to improve not just the information gathering, but maybe the storytelling?
Constantly. We're always looking at more and more platforms. People digest you differently. The days of someone tuning into the radio, that still exists, especially during the drive home. But in other ways, sometimes people only have 5 minutes a day, and if they can go onto Instagram or they can go onto Twitter and get 5 good minutes of what you offer, sometimes that's all you need to have a consistent customer. People consume things a lot differently nowadays, and it's your job to be able to provide your brand on all these different platforms so people can enjoy you depending on what their lifestyle is.
You fit in the corporate need to make sure the sponsors are happy.
Well, yeah. What it is you want to make sure you servicing all customers, even the ones that don't have time to listen to you on the radio.
Well, George, I could talk to you all day, and I don't want to take up your time, but I wanted to introduce you and what you do in 1010 CFRB to our listeners that are in the GTA. Is there an online presence that our international listeners can tune in?
If they go to newstalk1010.com, it'll forward you to the iHeart radio website, and also there's the iHeart radio app, and you can be in any country and listen to hundreds of different stations, and you can listen in particular to our station, News Talk 1010.
George, thank you for coming on the podcast.
Hey, I really appreciate being asked, and honestly, I had a lot of fun.
Well, thank you. And I'd love to have you back again. This is not the end, bro.
Absolutely. We'll do it again.
Thank you for listening to the Pure Garbage Podcast, and thanks to George. To find us, subscribe on iTunes, Spotify, Google Play, Podbean, or Stitcher.